Hawthorne, Georgia, a city with a peaceful facade, its streets paved with old cobblestones, rows of dark-tiled houses, and tree-lined avenues casting long shadows. But beneath that charming exterior lay deep-rooted cracks, tensions that had never truly healed. Dawn had just broken when Judge Evelyn Hart stepped into the city courthouse, a stately building with towering stone columns, where she had spent over 30 years upholding justice. She was 62 this year, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her deep brown eyes sharp and penetrating, as if capable of cutting through every lie. Even in silence, her presence commanded quiet and caution. Evelyn had once been a defense attorney, then a prosecutor, a woman unafraid to confront the rot within the system. Now, she was the first black female judge to sit on the city's highest bench, a fact many still refused to accept. But she had long grown accustomed to the cost of breaking glass ceilings. They didn't just throw stones. They pretended she never existed. That morning was supposed to be a routine arraignment, a teenage vandalism case. But Evelyn's instincts told her something was off. The clerk stood waiting outside the courtroom door, offering a tight-lipped smile. "Good morning, Judge Shaw. Officer Maddox is already inside." Evelyn paused. "Maddox?" "Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Cole Maddox, the one who arrested the boy in the Terrence Ward case. He's quite insistent." Her jaw tightened. Anyone in Hawthorne's justice system knew Cole Maddox, third-generation cop. Clean-shaven, sharp-dressed, powerful. He wore his smirk like it came issued with his badge and had enough connections to make any complaint disappear. Evelyn entered the courtroom in silence. She wasn't wearing her robe yet, hadn't taken her seat. Maddox stood at the prosecutor's table, arms crossed, irritation etched across his face. The teenage boy, Terrence Ward, no older than 16, sat beside a public defender, wide-eyed and anxious. Maddox didn't even glance her way. He barked toward the clerk. "Let's get this started. I don't have all day." Evelyn's voice was low and steady. "Then you'd better make time." Maddox turned, squinting as if trying to place her. A clerk, an assistant security. She wasn't robed, wasn't seated for him. She was invisible. "You with the defense or something?" He sneered. Evelyn didn't answer. She walked to the side table to examine the case file. The room was still mostly empty, just a few early reporters, some attorneys, and 2 officers standing at the back. Maddox, clearly annoyed, stepped toward her, snapping, "Hey, I'm talking to you." And then it happened. A slap, sudden, hard, and echoing. The sound sliced the air in half. Everything stopped. Papers froze mid-rustle. A coffee cup nearly tumbled. The overhead lights seemed to flicker. Evelyn didn't move. Her cheek burned, but she didn't touch it. Didn't flinch. She turned her head slowly, eyes locking onto the man who had just raised his hand against her. Maddox recoiled slightly, stunned by his own action, but showed no remorse. "People like you need to learn their place," he muttered, sneering. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice asked softly, "Is she okay?" Evelyn didn't look away. Not for a second. He still hadn't realized his mistake. He was standing in a trap he'd set for himself. "I don't care who you think you are. This is my courtroom." Evelyn stepped forward, then another step. The room held its breath. The clerk murmured, "She's not wearing her robe." But Maddox didn't hear it. He didn't see the change in the room, the quiet horror spreading like a wave. Then Evelyn spoke not loudly, but with a chill like the edge of a blade. "This how you treat court officials?" Sergeant one of the two officers behind Maddox went pale. A lawyer dropped their pen. Maddox blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" Evelyn ascended the bench, one step at a time. When she turned and sat in the judge's chair, the air in the room turned to ice. Maddox froze. For the first time in his life, he was afraid, not because of the slap, but because he had just slapped the wrong person. Judge Evelyn Shaw stood still behind the bench, her hands calmly yet firmly clasped together. The entire room was steeped in silence. No one dared move. No one dared breathe. Even Officer Darren Locke, the usually composed bailiff, looked as if he were holding his breath. "Sergeant Maddox." Evelyn spoke, her voice low but sharp as skin-slicing steel. "You just struck me in this courtroom, didn't you?" Cole Maddox opened his mouth, then shut it again. His tongue flicked to the corner of his lips as if searching for a convincing lie, but there was none. I didn't know who you were," he stammered defensively. "That's not what I asked." Evelyn cut in, clean as a blade. "I asked, did you put your hands on me? Yes or no?" Behind them, people in the courtroom began to shift. A young attorney had already pulled out a phone, camera on. This was no longer abuse of authority. This was becoming evidence. Maddox puffed his chest, trying to regain control. "You approached me. I didn't recognize you. You weren't wearing a judge's robe." Evelyn stared him down. "You think I'm beneath you," she said, each word a strike. Maddox clenched his jaw. "You're twisting this." "No, I'm stating the truth," Evelyn said firmly. "You assaulted a woman without provocation in a courtroom, and the only reason you've given is ignorance and arrogance." Maddox stepped forward, then froze, remembering where he was. He glanced at the two officers in the back. None dared meet his eyes. Evelyn's voice dropped sharper than any knife. "If I were a white male judge with the same title, would you have dared to slap me just because you didn't recognize me?" Maddox said nothing. That silence was the loudest confession of his life. "I'll take that as a denial," Evelyn said coldly. "And now, you're not just guilty of assault, but also contempt of court." Maddox snapped back, voice rising. "You're overreacting. I was just doing my job. That punk." He jabbed a finger at Terrence Ward. The teenage boy curled behind his lawyer. "Had a spray can. I caught him red-handed? That's enough." Evelyn cut in. Her voice thundered. The gavel slammed down twice. "You do not get to justify an assault by blaming a teenager." She turned to her clerk. Voice crisp. "Miss Porter, please enter into the record that Sergeant Cole Maddox admitted to assaulting a sitting judge in the courtroom without lawful cause." Maddox stepped back. The air around him shifted palpably. He knew this time. No one would come to save him. No union rep would rise to his defense. No phone call would make this disappear. Not this time. Evelyn looked to Officer Locke. "Is this courtroom being recorded?" "Yes, Your Honor," Locke replied, tension in his voice. "Good," Evelyn said. "Then the record will include visual evidence." Maddox rolled his eyes toward the ceiling. Two small red lights blinked from the security cameras. His expression changed entirely. No longer anger, now fear. "I didn't mean he began." Evelyn raised a hand to cut him off. "You've had 20 years of not meaning to. I've read your file. I've seen the complaints. I've also seen how they disappeared. But today is different. Sergeant, today there are witnesses. There are cameras. And there's a judge." He tried to speak again. Evelyn didn't allow it. "I've spent my entire career watching men like you confuse violence for law. fear for order, silence for consent, but not today. She stood. The room seemed to tense with her. By the authority vested in me as a judge of the State Federal Court of Georgia, Evelyn declared, and pursuant to Title 16, Chapter 3, Section 1 of the State Code, I hereby place Sergeant Cole Maddox under criminal investigation for the assault of a public officer. A murmur rose in the courtroom. Evelyn turned to Officer Locke. Place him under temporary custody. No handcuffs. He's still a sworn officer. I want this done professionally, but he is not to leave this room. Maddox gaped. You can't be serious. Evelyn didn't flinch, and yet you still knew how to raise your hand. He looked around, no allies, no exit, only the trap he had set for himself. The door closed behind him like the slam of a coffin lid. Locke stepped beside him, a hand resting lightly on his belt, not threatening, but ready. Maddox flushed red, fists clenched at his sides. Evelyn stared straight at him, her gaze a spear. A voice rose from the gallery. It was the prosecutor assigned to the vandalism case, gray-haired, face pale with fear. Your Honor, do you intend to continue with this hearing? Evelyn turned, voice low. I'll make that decision shortly. Then she addressed the courtroom. What happened here today is no longer an internal matter. This is a matter of law, precedent, and public trust. She looked directly at the reporters. You all witnessed this. A police officer, on duty, assaulted the presiding judge. You heard his words, saw his demeanor. Record it. Remember it. Because if the law cannot protect those who enforce it with fairness, then this is no longer a democracy. It is darkness. No one breathed. No one typed. The room held its silence, until Maddox snapped bitterly. You trying to make this your PR stunt? Evelyn turned her head slowly, and in her gaze was the first verdict. You think this is some performance? Sergeant Maddox. Judge Evelyn Shaw's voice was low and sharp, slicing through the tense courtroom like a thin blade. He didn't answer. Evelyn stepped around the bench, the click of her heels on the floor echoing like a countdown clock. As she approached him, her voice dropped, but the microphone on the bench caught every word. You've been protected for years, haven't you? She said quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. I've seen too many like you, the ones who walk into courtrooms convinced that everyone here is beneath them, the ones who say, I didn't know, when what they really mean is, I didn't care. Maddox glanced at Officer Darren Locke, but the bailiff didn't move. There was no escape. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Evelyn continued, her voice steady, mechanical. I will notify Internal Affairs immediately. I will personally file a formal complaint with the Attorney General's office before noon. The video from today will be sealed for legal investigation. But the press in this room, she looked toward the row of reporters. They already have more than enough to make this front-page news by midday. Maddox's lips moved. You're destroying my life over a misunderstanding. No, Sergeant. Evelyn cut him off. Icy. You destroyed your own career the moment you raised your hand against me. Her voice was the final nail in the coffin. Maddox wavered, his eyes drifting to Terrence Ward, the teenager he had arrested that morning. But now, the boy's eyes held no fear, only pity. The same look Maddox had seen in handcuffed men right before the cell door shut. I've served this city for 20 years. Maddox spoke again, his voice close to pleading. I've risked my life. I've arrested real criminals. And now you're throwing me away over a moment of lost control. Evelyn returned to the bench, climbing each step as if ascending to the altar of justice. I'm not throwing you to the wolves, she said. I'm turning you over to the law. For 20 years, you've hidden behind a badge. Today, that badge will bind you." She sat, the judge's robe settling around her like armor. Evelyn tapped the microphone lightly. "This hearing is not over," she declared, "but the trial for the defendant in the vandalism case is postponed until tomorrow. The arresting officer has compromised the integrity of the proceedings." Terrence's defense attorney stood and adjusted his tie. "Thank you, Your Honor." Evelyn nodded. "Escort your client out through the west exit. Ensure his safety." The boy rose, casting Maddox one final glance before leaving. Whatever he was thinking, it had changed his posture, less timid, less deferential. Maddox remained silent. The fire in his eyes had dimmed. They now darted around, calculating, searching, like a predator trapped in a cage. Evelyn watched him, as if observing a dangerous animal, realizing the bars were locked. She leaned toward the mic again. "Officer Locke, escort Sergeant Maddox to holding cell B. I will personally contact Internal Affairs and the Chief of Police. This is no longer an internal matter. It is now a criminal one." Maddox didn't resist, but his jaw clenched so tightly the grinding of teeth was audible. When Locke placed a light hand on his elbow, guiding him toward the side exit, Maddox muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Evelyn to hear, "You think you've won." Evelyn didn't look at him. She simply murmured back, "I just think for once the person who needed to lose finally is." The courtroom door shut behind them. The news had already spread faster than the court bell. A judge assaulted by a cop, not just any cop, but Cole Maddox. And not just any judge, but Evelyn Shaw. When Evelyn returned to her chambers, 2 voicemails were waiting, one from the police chief's office, one from a contact in Internal Affairs. She didn't play them right away. Instead, she removed her robe, folded it carefully, and hung it on the hook. She looked at herself in the mirror. The mark on her cheek had faded into a light pink hue, but it was still visible. She stared at it, not because it hurt, but because she needed to remember how it felt. To remember that hundreds had left this courthouse with wounds no one could see, on their skin, on their dignity. No one spoke up for them. No one paused. A soft knock. Marshal Trent Holloway, her longtime bailiff of nearly a decade, entered. Broad-shouldered, serious-faced, fiercely loyal. "He's been placed in holding cell B," Trent reported. "Internal Affairs is sending 2 agents. They'll be here in about 20 minutes. Evelyn nodded. "Thank you." Trent hesitated. "I just heard from the clerk. The police union's already calling. They're trying to sweep this under." "Of course they are," Evelyn replied, eyes still on her desk. "But this time, they're too late." She pulled open a drawer and took out a yellow legal pad. Her handwriting was neat, decisive like architectural drawings. She began to write. "Incident assault in courtroom. Status documented witnesses present, cameras. Recording officer record 5 complaints in 7 years related. Ada Marcus Delaney dismissed 2 misconduct cases." She looked up. "I want every case Maddox has been involved in, either as arresting officer or witness for the past 10 years, pulled. Flag them all." "That list's going to be long," Trent said. "Then we better start now." He nodded and turned to go. But just as his hand touched the door handle, Evelyn spoke again, her voice low and slow. "They thought this was just a slap." Trent paused. "They don't realize," she continued. "They just opened a door we've been knocking on for years, and that door was never going to close again." Inside Judge Evelyn Shaw's chambers. The lights were still on, though it was close to midnight. On the conference table, lay a thick case file. The label on the cover printed in bold Maddox. Cole. Seated across from Evelyn were two internal affairs agents. One was Agent Naomi West, a black woman with eyes sharp as blades and a voice that never wasted a word. The other was a sharp-eyed Latino man with a voice as direct as a blade, Agent Leo Martinez. "We've been monitoring him for a while," Naomi began, opening the file. "But his record has always been just clean enough to avoid prosecution. Evidence disappears at just the right time. Cases closed with no follow-up investigation. Convenient." Evelyn repeated the word, nearly spitting it. That word should be a felony. Leo leaned forward, pulled out a USB drive, and inserted it into a tablet. "Your courtroom camera footage has already been backed up to our server, both video and audio. We've verified the strike." His words, "your response." He continued, "We also logged everyone who was present in the courtroom that day. The chain of responsibility will have to be addressed." Evelyn didn't blink. "I don't just want accountability. I want to tear down the foundation that shielded him all these years." Naomi looked at her, head tilting slightly. "Judge Shaw, how far are you willing to take this?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "All the way." Leo nodded slowly. "Then it's time we show you this." He turned the screen around. A 2019 internal report appeared, a complaint from an anonymous civilian. The contents were horrifying. Maddox had assaulted a 17-year-old during an arrest, edited the body cam footage, and the original had vanished without a trace. This file was closed without charges, Naomi said. Reason, lack of evidence. Evelyn scrolled to the bottom of the document. The name of the reviewing officer made her stop Detective Grant Avery. She read aloud, then looked up. "You mean—" "Captain Avery, Maddox's former training officer." "That's the one," Leo confirmed. "Retired last year. But his entire command staff is still intact," Naomi added, voice steady. "We just found 3 more complaints dismissed in the exact same way. Same signature, same reason. Insufficient evidence. And each time, Maddox's name is there, alongside one other name." She pointed to the screen. Another name appeared. ADA Marcus Delaney. Evelyn frowned. Marcus, the assistant district attorney who oversaw most of Maddox's cases. The one who's exchanged more than a few knowing glances with him in court. Naomi nodded. "We suspect he's the bridge between the police and the DA's office." Evelyn leaned back, her heart pounding. This wasn't just about one violent officer. This was a network, a system. Maddox wasn't the rot, he was the stench rising from the decay. "What do you want to do now?" Judge Leo asked. Evelyn's voice dropped. "But it was steel. I want a list. Every case Maddox has touched. Every complaint buried. And every prosecutor who helped cover it up. By dawn," she emphasized. "You realize that'll take all night?" Leo asked. "Then don't stop." Naomi offered a faint smile. "I think we're going to get along just fine." By 6 the next morning, the Hawthorne courthouse was still wrapped in silence. Only the faint hum of janitorial work and flickering hallway fluorescence broke the stillness. But inside Judge Evelyn Shaw's chambers, no one had slept. Naomi and Leo were still sorting through files. A whiteboard was filled top to bottom with notes. The table was scattered with printed reports, emails, testimony transcripts, all marked with red ink. Marshal Trent Holloway entered, carrying hot coffee. Without a word, he set it down, then sat and picked up a file, thick enough to indict an entire system. Evelyn was still writing in her yellow legal pad. Her handwriting remained sharp, precise each stroke, like it could be entered into evidence. "How many cases now?" Trent asked, though he already had a good idea. 19 complaints directly tied to Maddox. Evelyn replied, eyes never leaving the page. 12 involving officers under his command. 4 prosecutors failed to press charges despite clear evidence. 2 body cam videos disappeared during internal investigations. Trent fell silent. "This isn't a bad apple," he said heavily. "This is a rotten orchard." Evelyn looked up. Her eyes were deep, black, and unflinching like mountain stone. "And that orchard has been watered with protection, silence, and the system itself." The phone rang. Evelyn picked up. "Shaw," she said curtly. A man's voice came through low and unmistakably familiar. "Evelyn, it's me, Chief Leonard Price." She leaned back. "I knew you'd call, but I didn't think it'd be this early." "Guess why?" "Because I saw the video," Price said, his tone low. "And I guess," Evelyn replied, "you're not calling to defend Maddox." Silence. Then Price admitted, "I'm calling to stop the storm." "Too late." "Leonard." "Evelyn," Price pleaded, "you're bringing the whole system down. This isn't just about a slap anymore. You're pulling the thread that's going to unravel the whole damn machine." "That's the point," Evelyn said calmly. Price's tone hardened. "I'm not your enemy." "Then you've been quiet for too long. The union's applying pressure. The mayor wants answers. And now I'm hearing you went directly to internal affairs because we did nothing." "Correct." "You're pouring gasoline on a fire." "No," Evelyn said. "I'm shining a light on the darkest corner." A pause. Then Price's voice turned grim. "You want Maddox prosecuted. Fine, I'll support that. But if you keep dragging in command staff, prosecutors, retired leadership, we won't be able to clean up the fallout." Evelyn's voice struck like chisels on stone. "Then maybe it's time we stop cleaning and start rebuilding." She hung up. Evelyn stared at the phone for a moment, then set it down like delivering a verdict. Trent looked at her. That was a veiled threat. She nodded, "And I'm glad he's scared." The door opened. Naomi walked in, holding a dark red folder. "We just found something. You need to see this. Agent Naomi West didn't waste words." She strode into the room with a slim red folder in hand and eyes hard as forged steel. "We just found something you need to see immediately." Judge Evelyn Shaw stood at once, meeting her halfway. Naomi opened the folder and flipped to the first page. An audio transcript pulled from the Hawthorne Police Department's surveillance system recorded 2 years ago in the department's locker room. The voice rang out, unmistakable. Sergeant Cole Maddox, laughing harshly. "Has she ever gotten close to you guys? That Judge Evelyn, whatever. Walks around the courthouse like she owns the place. That robe's got her thinking she's untouchable." Another voice chimed in identity still unconfirmed, asking, "She ever come after you directly?" Maddox burst into laughter again. "Let her try. I've got people backing me who outrank her. If she steps too far, I swear she'll never sit the bench again. 1 complaint's all it takes. Politically biased judge, out of the system in a heartbeat." Evelyn stared at the transcript, then looked up at Naomi. "Who else has heard this?" "We just recovered it," Naomi replied. "It was marked low priority in another investigation and buried. The second voice is still running through our recognition system, but—" She hesitated a beat. "We suspect it's ADA Marcus Delaney." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had long suspected him, but never expected to hear such contempt caught so vividly on record. "If you confirm that—" "We will," Naomi said firmly. "There's more," she added, opening a second folder. There was an emergency meeting at the district attorney's office last night. Someone's trying to have you removed from the Maddox case. Evelyn's jaw clenched. They want to disqualify me because I'm the victim. Naomi nodded. They're citing conflict of interest. If successful, Maddox will face only administrative charges and be allowed to retire early. You'll be removed, and it'll be spun as you being too emotional to handle the case fairly. Marshal Trent Holloway muttered a curse. Evelyn checked the clock, 7:02 a.m. The courthouse would open in under an hour. I want a public hearing, she declared. I want the press present. I want the record to show that I recused myself not because I lacked objectivity, but because I refused to let this case get buried. Naomi studied her for a moment, then nodded with quiet admiration. You're planning to push back. No, Evelyn replied, eyes blazing. I'm planning to blow it up. By 9:00 a.m., tension crackled through Hawthorne Courthouse like static. Reporters packed the hallways. Clerks whispered nervously. Attorneys avoided eye contact. Everyone knew something massive was about to unfold. Evelyn Shaw entered the main courtroom without her judge's robe. She didn't take the bench. Today, she wasn't presiding. Today, she was fighting. At her side were Marshal Trent and Agent Naomi West. As they entered, the chatter died instantly, like a switch had been flipped. Across the room stood A.D. Marcus Delaney, beside a young white man in a perfectly tailored gray suit. His name tag read Elliott Parish Representative from the State Ethics Board, but his expression said clearly, Appointed Executioner. Judge Shaw. Parish began, flashing a thin smile. We've received your request for a public hearing regarding your recusal from the Maddox case. I'm here to formalize that request and enter it into the official record. Evelyn took a seat. The press gallery behind her was full. I've reviewed the prosecution's argument. Evelyn began. They claim I may be biased because I'm the victim in Sergeant Maddox's assault. Delaney didn't blink. Our concern is purely procedural. State law allows a judge to recuse themselves to preserve neutrality. I'm well aware of that law. Evelyn interrupted, and that's why I am choosing to step aside. Not because I lack impartiality, but because I refuse to let this case disappear quietly. She turned to the press. Her eyes landed on a black female reporter in the front row. I formally request that the Maddox case be moved to a special review docket, and I further petition for the appointment of an independent federal monitor to investigate all matters connected to this officer and his direct associates. The room buzzed. Delaney leaned forward. Judge, I urge caution. This is not the forum for conspiracy allegations. I'm not alleging, Evelyn replied, voice like ice. I'm proving. She handed a folder to Naomi, who placed it on the table and opened it for all to see. Inside 3 complaint forms, 5 sealed memos, 2 missing body cam videos, and a testimony transcript from a 2018 juvenile hearing, all bearing Marcus Delaney's signature. You declined to prosecute Maddox in 5 separate cases, Evelyn said. Despite evidence of excessive force and conflicting testimonies, and in every one of those cases, the defendants were coerced into plea deals, mostly young black teens, without legal representation. Delaney turned pale. Naomi placed another document on the table. And here's a transfer slip, she said, addressing Parish. A $15,000 payment from an organization linked to the Hawthorne Police Welfare Fund to the State Justice Foundation. Half of that was routed to a legal defense fund for Cole Maddox in last year's civil suit. Parish swallowed. That's not relevant to the judge's recusal motion. It is relevant, Evelyn snapped. If public funds are being used to shield rogue officers, then this isn't just related. It's a system, a structure built to protect power, not justice. She turned to Delaney. Tell me, Marcus, who protected Maddox when the 2019 body cam footage went missing? That case sent a teenager to the hospital. So where did the recording go? Delaney opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Naomi spoke for him. We believe it wasn't lost. It was rerouted. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Rerouted, where Naomi held up another document. To the servers of a private security firm based in Atlanta, a firm with a consulting contract with the mayor's office. Evelyn stared straight at Marcus. And who authorized that contract? Delaney stayed silent. Naomi nodded. He did. The courtroom erupted. Flashbulbs burst. Voices murmured. Breathing quickened, but Evelyn remained seated, hands clasped before her, like a mountain preparing to move. Agent Naomi West slid the small document across the table to Judge Evelyn Shaw. It was transferred to an external server, owned by a private security firm based in Atlanta. Evelyn frowned. Oh, does that firm have a contract with the mayor's office? Naomi nodded. Yes. And the person who authorized that contract. She turned to look at A.D. Marcus Delaney, who stood silent and rigid like stone. Was you? The courtroom erupted like a disturbed beehive. Shouts filled the air. Cameras flashed wildly. Chairs scraped and bumped as people whispered and exchanged looks. Delaney shot to his feet, his chair skidding with a sharp screech. This is character assassination. No, Evelyn answered firmly. This is truth, uncovered, and it's long overdue. Elliot Parrish, the ethics board representative, also stood his face pale, as though he'd never witnessed a spectacle like this in his entire legal career. I need time to process this information. You'll have it, Evelyn replied. But make the record clear. I'm recusing myself not because I'm threatened, not because I'm biased, and absolutely not because I will stay silent. She turned toward the reporters, her voice ringing like a bronze bell. This city has protected a system of unchecked power for far too long. Today isn't just about a slap. It's proof of what happens when someone believes they can act without consequence, because every level above them chose to look the other way. Her eyes landed on Delaney. But those levels are cracking. Delaney stumbled out of the room, phone buzzing relentlessly in his hand. Parrish followed, his face damp with sweat. Evelyn exhaled, turning to Naomi and Marshal Trent Holloway. You think they'll strike back? Trent asked in a hushed voice. They already have. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. Just 5 chilling words. You need to stop now. No name, no direct threat, but it sent a chill down her spine. Evelyn turned the screen toward Naomi. Even better, Naomi said, smirking. Means we hit a nerve. Evelyn rose and walked to the courtroom window. Outside, rooftops, buildings, and offices slowly came into sharper focus in her eyes, each one a secret, a silence, a shadow. This isn't about one officer anymore. It's the entire machine, and somewhere inside that machine, someone is watching. Across the city, Cole Maddox sat in his cold, solitary cell. Not cold from temperature, the smooth, gray concrete walls barely registered on his skin, but cold from within. A mental chill that scraped away every layer of belief he used to cling to. No badge, no gun, no brothers in blue, just him and 4 walls, and the dawning realization that the world outside had changed. He stared at his hands, hands that once dragged criminals from alleyways in North Haven, hands that wrote reports, that gestured confidently while testifying in court. Now, they trembled slightly. The guard outside didn't speak. No nod, no acknowledgement, nothing. Even here, he was alone. Suddenly, the door lock clicked. It creaked open. A man stepped inside, gray suit, bald head, a face like forged steel. No introduction, no card. He tossed a folder onto the chair. "Your lifeline," the man said, "or your anchor." Maddox raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a fan of riddles." "Then I'll be clear. I represent interests that are extremely concerned about what Judge Evelyn Shaw is digging up. You used to be useful, but now I'm a liability." Maddox growled. "Exactly. But because of past services, no one's fed you to the dogs yet. But if you sit here and let her control the narrative, don't expect protection." "What do you people want?" Maddox asked, eyes narrowing. The man smiled. "We want you to remind her who holds the power." He opened the folder. Inside, personal photos of Evelyn, her home address, family history, photos of her with her late husband, a former attorney. Maddox's heart pounded faster. "This is surveillance." "No," the man replied coolly. "This is leverage." Maddox stepped back. "You're insane. You want me to threaten a judge?" "Not threaten," he said, smirking. "Just remind her, power doesn't live in a judge's bench. It lives in fear, and you know how to plant that." Maddox stared him down. "This wasn't a rescue. It was a gamble. If I do this," he asked, "what do I get a ticket out of federal prison? A new job with a private security firm. No questions. No record. And if I don't, then you rot in this box, and no one remembers your name." The man turned and left, leaving Maddox and the folder behind. Maddox stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up. Back at Hawthorne Courthouse, Evelyn moved through the corridor like striding through a storm, coat draped over her shoulders. Her heels struck the floor with resolute cadence. The media had returned. Some nodded at her. Others whispered into hidden phones. Inside her office, Trent was waiting. "You didn't reply to any messages. I needed to breathe." Evelyn answered, "You've got 6 missed calls. 3 from the mayor's office, 2 from the ethics board, 1 from your sister." Evelyn raised a brow. "My sister saw you on the news. Said you look taller." Evelyn laughed, then sobered. She sat and began flipping through Naomi's latest file updates on Delaney and a redacted name tied to a questionable security contract. Before she could finish, her phone buzzed again. At 9:00 The Brightmoor courthouse felt like it was boiling under invisible pressure. Throughout the hallways, members of the press lurked in silence. Legal aides whispered behind barely open doors. Lawyers avoided eye contact. Everyone could sense something cracking, something far bigger than a courtroom assault. Judge Evelyn Hart entered the main courtroom, not in her robe, not taking the bench. Today, she wasn't presiding. Today, she was fighting. Behind her walked Marshal Daniel Brooks and Federal Internal Affairs Agent Naomi Price. At the far end of the room stood Ada Carson Ramsey, now pale, next to Elliot Parrish, the young, stone-faced representative from the State Ethics Committee, looking like he'd stepped straight out of a law manual. "Judge Hart," Parrish said, flashing a paper-thin smile. "We've received your request for a public hearing. I'm here to verify and enter it into record, and I'm here to ensure it's not manipulated." Evelyn replied, her voice hard, her eyes like spear tips aimed directly at Ramsey. Evelyn presented her petition requesting the case of a Sergeant Russell Drake be moved to federal special oversight and that a full investigation be launched into all individuals who had worked with or covered for him. When she finished, the room held its breath. "You're implying a conspiracy," Ramsey asked, trying to stay composed. "Not implying. Proving." Evelyn turned to Naomi, who placed a thick file on the table. 3 complaints, 5 sealed memos, 2 missing surveillance recordings, and a copy of a 2018 juvenile hearing transcript, all signed by you, Ada Ramsey. The courtroom was stunned, but Naomi wasn't finished. She presented a $15,000 wire transfer originating from a fund connected to the Brightmoor Police Union money later used for Drake's legal defense. "That's irrelevant," Parrish stammered. "If public funds are used to shield rogue officers, then it's relevant to all of us," Evelyn declared clearly. Then she dropped the final blow, a document from Naomi, the server address of the missing 2019 footage. The server belonged to a private security firm in Atlanta, directly tied to the Brightmoor mayor's re-election campaign, and the contract approved by Carson Ramsey. Indisputable. The courtroom exploded. Cameras flashed. People stood, gasped, shouted. Ramsey stormed out mid-text storm, sweat pouring. Evelyn stood still, calm as bedrock in a flood. "You think they'll retaliate?" Daniel Brooks asked quietly. "They already have." Evelyn held out her phone. A message from an unknown number. "Stop now." Naomi glanced at it and nodded. "Good. That means we've struck the nerve center." In a holding cell, Russell Drake sat hunched on a concrete bench, hands trembling not from the cold, but from the slow tightening circle of truth. He used to be a symbol of invisible power. Now, he was just a shadow. The door creaked open. A man stepped in gray suit, bald head, eyes cold as forged steel. "Who let you in?" Drake growled. The man didn't answer. He dropped a folder onto the bench. "Your lifeline. Or your chains." Inside, personal photos of Evelyn, her address, her relatives, even a picture of her grandson riding his bike after school. "This is surveillance. This is a threat," Drake said. "Rattled?" "No," the man replied coldly. "It's a reminder that power doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes from fear. And you know how to deliver it." Drake sat in silence for a long time before finally saying, "If I do this, what do I get? An exit, a new identity, or you'll rot in here and be forgotten." The man left, leaving behind a haunting chill and a dangerous choice. The next morning, Evelyn received a package no sender. Inside, a photograph of her grandson taken 2 days ago. On the back, "Know your place." She didn't flinch. She picked up the phone and spoke into the receiver. "Connect me to the U.S. Marshal's office, immediately, at the Brightmoor Federal Building." Evelyn laid the photo before a team of 3 federal officers and 2 DOJ representatives. Marshal Howard Griggs asked, "Are you sure Drake sent this? I'm sure someone is acting for him. And he wouldn't risk this unless someone gave him the green light." "What are you requesting?" asked Melissa Tran of the DOJ. "Full protection for my family? Arrest Drake today. And freeze every case file connected to him until an independent investigation is launched. That will shake the city's justice system to its core." Tran warned. "Then let it shake," Evelyn said. "Better hollow and honest than rotting in silence." That night, Drake was quietly transferred from holding no documents, no files, just a silent extraction, a burner phone, and an unmarked car. One warning: don't touch her. Don't show your face. Just make her feel it. The same man from before said through the window. Drake started the engine, muttering, "I've been making people feel it my whole damn life." At dawn, Evelyn received confirmation of a new lead, a security contract linked directly to the mayor. But what froze her was the name Erica Talbot, a reporter who vanished 6 weeks earlier after filing a financial inquiry into that same company. She died in her car, Naomi said. Reports said overdose. But there was no substance abuse history in her medical record, Evelyn countered. Correct. But we found her investigative notebook, Naomi added, handing Evelyn a thick journal. And if what she suspected is true, then what we've done so far is only the beginning. Evelyn looked down at the notebook, then up with steel in her eyes. Good. We'll dig. Deep. Until we hit the root. Daniel stepped in. They've started planting fake stories online, smearing your background, inventing scandals from your college days, even harassing your grandson's school. Evelyn just nodded. Good. It's time we rewrite the rules. In the late afternoon, sunlight poured through the thick glass windows of the federal courthouse in downtown Brightmoor, casting a golden hue across the wooden floor and glinting in the pensive eyes of Judge Evelyn Hart. She no longer sat behind the familiar seat of judicial power, but side by side with agents and representatives of the Department of Justice as an ordinary citizen speaking out against something deeply wrong. DOJ Representative Melissa Tran slid a thick stack of documents across the table toward Evelyn. We've reopened the file on Erica Talbot, the journalist found dead in her car last year. Initial ruling was overdose, but she flipped to a page. The forensic report was altered using an internal system account that no longer exists. Evelyn tightened her grip on the pen in her hand. Did anyone ever imagine truth could be erased like pencil? Her voice was low, but sharp as a blade. Not anymore, said Naomi Price, the internal affairs agent, with unwavering resolve. We've formed a multi-agency task force, IA, DOJ, and an independent judicial panel. Marshal Daniel Brooks, standing beside Evelyn from the beginning, added, Russell Drake still hasn't talked, but he's cracking. Evelyn looked down at the list of names, cases, indictments, every line a fracture, now becoming the fault lines threatening to collapse an entire system. She rose and walked to the window. Outside, a large crowd had gathered, banners raised high, photos of past victims held aloft. On the courthouse steps, the golden light shimmered over rows of people waiting for answers. Daniel whispered beside her, You did it. Not yet, Evelyn replied, eyes still on the crowd. All I did was flip the switch. The rats are finding their own way out. He nodded slightly. What now? She took a deep breath. Now we see how deep the tunnel goes. Because Russell Drake was only the beginning. Now, Evelyn Hart wasn't just naming names. She was preparing to burn the entire rotting house down. 9:30 the next morning, in front of the Brightmoor courthouse, hundreds had already gathered. Cameras rolled, recorders ready, signs raised with slogans like Justice for All or Justice for None. Evelyn stood behind the curtain, black blazer crisp, hair neatly pinned, eyes like steel. Naomi stepped up. Drake's been transferred to secure custody, and he talked. Evelyn turned to her. To who DOJ agents? He named 12 people. Naomi handed her the list. Evelyn scanned it 7 police officers, 2 prosecutors, 1 retired precinct captain, 1 city councilman, and then stopped cold. Judge Benjamin Halcraft-Toft. Her breath caught. The man who once mentored her in law school. The man who called her the future of Brightmoor's bench. No, Evelyn whispered. Ben. Daniel read over her shoulder, his face tightening. He's the one who swore you in. Naomi spoke gently. He's also the one who approved 3 questionable cases tied to Drake. One of them silenced a civil rights complaint that never made it to trial. Evelyn clenched her fists. This isn't just about corrupt cops. This is a rotten system. Politics. Generations of silence. Naomi nodded. And it survives on fear. Then we're breaking that silence, Evelyn replied, and walked out of the room. Before a sea of cameras, Evelyn stepped up to the podium. The square fell silent. She held the folder in her hands, eyes scanning the crowd, with steel resolve and a heart cracked open. I became a judge because I believed in a promise called justice. She began, but that promise is meaningless if it's not kept. The documents in my hands name 12 individuals who, over the course of a decade, protected one another as they abused power. Among them, police officers, attorneys, and a sitting judge. Gas rippled through the crowd. I've handed this list to the federal authorities. I will not read their names aloud, not out of fear of consequence, but because I still believe in legal process. The very process these individuals denied to their victims. We're not here because of a slap. We're here because of what that slap revealed, a system fueled by fear and loyalty to falsehood. From the back, someone shouted, "We believe in you!" Judge Hart. Applause erupted, tentative at first, then rising like a wave. Daniel stood by, stoic, pride flickering in his eyes. Naomi never dropped her gaze from the rooftops, ready to shield applause with her body if needed. Evelyn had just drawn a red line across the map of power, and somewhere, someone was already aiming back. That afternoon, in her quiet office, Evelyn's phone rang. The voice on the other end stopped her cold. "Clara? It's me, Benjamin Halcrafthoft. I suppose you've seen my name on that list. Before you destroy everything," he said, "understand that some structures exist because they are the final anchors. If you tear them down, you bring down the entire order of this city." He paused. "You don't want blood, Clara. You don't want chaos. Walk away while you still can." The call ended. Daniel entered just in time, frowning. Was that a black SUV pulling out by the loading dock? Evelyn turned. It was Halcrafthoft. He just gave me a warning. Was that a threat? No, Evelyn said. It was a warning. That's worse. Marshal Daniel Brooks crossed his arms, eyes sharp as steel. You're not backing down. Are you? Judge Evelyn Hart looked him straight in the eye. Never. Midnight. The counterattack began. A vague article appeared online, Judge Hart involved in judicial misconduct in 2009. No sources, no evidence, just a stream of fabricated allegations. Within hours, social media was flooded with hashtags. All's activist judge. Hart must resign. Bot accounts spread disinformation. Newsrooms received anonymous sources accusing Evelyn of ties to radical organizations. A photo from her student days, her fist raised during a protest, was doctored into an extremist symbol. Even her grandson's school was contacted, asking whether the child is being indoctrinated. They weren't just targeting her name, they were targeting her blood. Evelyn sat in the dark, eyes fixed on a screen, overflowing with toxic headlines. They'll try to burn it all down, Brooks said from the doorway. Voice low your name, your career, your legacy. Evelyn nodded. Then we changed the rules. She opened a drawer, pulled out a small black notebook, and handed it to Brooks. What's this? The things I never said. About Halcrafthoft. About the shadowy cases. The whispered deals in back rooms. The handshakes at private fundraisers. Brooks flipped through it quickly. Jesus, Evelyn, this isn't self-defense. This is a nuclear bomb. I'm not interested in surviving anymore. Daniel, I want to make sure they can never hide in the dark again. That night, files were backed up, evidence encrypted, allies awakened. In a small room overlooking Brightmoor, Judge Evelyn Hart prepared for the final hearing not to judge a man, but to put an entire system on trial. The system that created men like Russell Drake. 3 weeks later, the federal courthouse was packed. Citizens filled the square. Reporters flooded the hallways. The U.S. Marshals stood in a sealed formation. Evelyn sat in the front row, not on the bench, but as a witness to history. Russell Drake faced 5 felony charges: assault on a federal judge, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to suppress evidence, witness intimidation, and perjury. But Drake wasn't alone. Indictments were unsealed. Ada Carson Ramsey had resigned in disgrace and was negotiating a plea. Judge Hal Krafthoft had been suspended pending investigation. 2 police chiefs were dismissed. 3 officers turned state's witness. The broker, the man who had met Drake in his cell, vanished without a trace. When the prosecutor rose, the court calls Judge Evelyn Hart. The room held its breath. Evelyn took the stand, swore in, sat down, not with power, but with clarity. What happened on the morning of April 11th? The prosecutor asked. I was slapped across the face in my courtroom. Evelyn answered, her voice low, solid as granite, by a man who believed I didn't belong there. And what did that mean to you? Evelyn paused. It proved that the system I gave my life to was no longer strong enough to protect the people who defend it. That law, respect, and truth are now granted only to those who fit the mold the powerful have chosen. She looked to the jury, her gaze unwavering. But it also meant something else. That silence is no longer a shield. If I don't stand, others will always be forced to kneel. The prosecutor nodded. No further questions. The defense attorney stepped forward, young, tense, out of his depth. Do you believe you're above the law? Evelyn looked at him like she might a misdirected student. No, I stand beneath it, like everyone else. That's the whole point. A light laugh rose from the gallery. The presiding judge tapped the gavel in warning. Did you bring personal bias into this investigation? I brought truth, Evelyn replied. And if the truth makes people uncomfortable, that isn't bias. That's justice doing its job. Drake sat motionless. The rage was gone. Only the blank stare of a man who knew he'd lost. 2 days later, the verdict: guilty, on all counts. But Drake was no longer the center of the storm. A week later, the state launched a full judicial misconduct probe. 140 cases were reopened. The Human Rights Commission began auditing police complaint procedures. The governor announced a bipartisan reform task force. The Brightmoor Police Department was placed under federal oversight. On a rainy day, Evelyn returned to the courtroom where it had all begun. The echo of that slap still lingered in the air, but everything else had changed. She stood before the judge's bench, silently gazing at her reflection on the polished wood. Daniel Brooks entered, coat still wet. They want to name the council chamber after you. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. I'm not dead. Exactly, he grinned. Makes it weird. She chuckled softly, then turned serious again. Will the reforms stick? Daniel shrugged. Some will. Others need time. Evelyn nodded. Justice isn't a moment. It's erosion and rebuilding. That afternoon, she stepped up to the podium before the State Judicial Council. Flashbulbs burst. Microphones buzzed. I hereby submit my resignation. Gasps. Murmurs. I still believe in the law, in its power to protect, to punish, and to heal, but I also believe that old institutions must be rebuilt by new hands. I lit the fire, and I won't stay just to bask in its warmth. A member of the council stood up. Judge Hart, your actions have inspired a movement. You could stay and lead that change? Evelyn gave a soft, bittersweet smile. Change doesn't need monuments. It needs momentum. She turned to walk away, but not before leaving them with one final message. Make sure the next woman who wears this robe doesn't have to fight just to be heard. 2 months later, she returned to her family home in Brightmoor Hills. The stillness no longer felt like a threat. It felt like cleansing. Her grandson, the boy who had once been the indirect target of a rotting system, was biking home from school. His backpack bounced as he pedaled. The moment he saw her on the porch, he dropped the bike and bolted up the steps. "Aunt Evelyn," he cried. She caught him in her arms and held him tightly, without a word. "I saw you on TV," he murmured into her shoulder. "I know you made them listen." Evelyn looked into those clear, unguarded eyes. "I made them look, listening. That's still up to them." He nodded, with the quiet understanding only a child who has seen injustice could have. They sat on the porch, watching the sun slip below the horizon. The city of Brightmoor still murmured in the distance, but here it was, quiet. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. Evelyn closed her eyes and exhaled, not in surrender, but because at last she had found peace. This wasn't just a courtroom tragedy. It was a mirror held up to society. Racist cop slaps the wrong person was only the spark. This was a story about power, prejudice, and the cost of silence. More importantly, it was an anthem of courage, of standing when others kneel, of speaking when the world demands your silence. Judge Evelyn Hart was never the typical hero. She didn't rise from hate, but from justice. And she reminded us all no system is too sturdy to be broken if the people challenging it are steadfast enough and wise enough to know what is truly worth fighting for. For those of an earlier generation, this story reopens an older wound. They've seen injustice change names and faces over decades, but hope still lives as long as there are people like Evelyn who refuse to yield. She didn't stand for herself. She stood for the generation to come, for her grandson, for the forgotten, for all of us. The story you just witnessed isn't just about a slap. It's not just about an arrogant cop or a dramatic courtroom. It's a reflection of an entire system, a system too used to staying silent in the face of wrongdoing, turning its back on truth, and burying voices that don't fit the script. Judge Evelyn Hart isn't a hero in the traditional sense. She didn't win with power or luck. She won because she refused to bend, not for herself, but for the generations to come, for the children growing up in a city still marked by discrimination, for the victims justice has yet to name. And you watching this video are part of that story too. Every time we speak truth, every time we share a story like this, we help fuel change. We may not end injustice in a single day, but we can choose not to look away. We can choose to stand with the light, even if it's small, as long as it's steady. Evelyn Hart's story may have ended, but the fire she lit still burns, in the eyes of every viewer, in every share, every like, every retelling. We can do more than just feel something. We can act, with empathy, by amplifying voices that were once silenced. If this story moved you, if you believe it deserves to be heard, leave a like to show your support. Share this video with someone who needs to know that truth still exists. And subscribe for more stories like this. Stories of courage, of clarity, of voices that matter. Because justice doesn't come from a robe or a high seat in a courtroom. It comes from a heart that knows right from wrong, from a community that refuses to stay quiet, and from people like you willing to listen, to act, and to carry the message forward. Thank you for watching to the very end. And remember, true justice doesn't need a loud voice. It just needs to be present, and it will echo forever.